So now that we've accounted for all of the costs of our first stage of production, which is the machining department, we can move on to the costs in the second phase of production, which is Hogan Company's assembly department. And for this, we're going to start in the same manner that we did before, figuring out how many units were in beginning WIP at the beginning of the period. And our information tells us that Hogan Company is beginning this period with 400 units in beginning WIP. They transferred in 2,000 units, which you'll notice is also the amount of units transferred out by the machining department, which means the assembly department has a total of 2,400 gonculators that they have to account for. So let's account for our units. The assembly department completed and transferred out, according to our information, 1,900 gonculators during the period, and at the end of the period they're still working on 500 of them are ending WIP, which means we can account for 2,400 gonculators, which is the amount that we had to account for, so we're good there. Now we need to determine our equivalent units. So for transferred in, let's start with ending work in process. They would have never been transferred in if they weren't complete for all of the costs of all the departments we transferred in for. In other words, all of these units that were transferred in have to be complete for all of the costs associated with the machining department. So if we had 500 units in ending WIP, all 500 of them have to be complete for all the costs that were transferred into us. For direct materials and conversion costs, again, we need to check our degree of completion from our information. These 500 units are 20% complete for direct materials, which in other words is saying that if we multiply 500 times that 20%, those 500 units that are 20% complete cost about the equivalent as it would to finish 100 gonculators fully. For conversion costs, we take our 500 units in ending WIP and we multiply that by the 40% rate of completion, and that comes up with 200 equivalent units complete for conversion costs. For completed and transferred out, just like it was before, we would not have transferred out these units from the assembly department if they weren't complete for all of the costs of assembly. We're finished with them, which means all of the costs from this department have to be incurred within these units that we transferred out. So again, completed and transferred out, it's always the same number all the way across the line. Now we need to figure out what our total units accounted for, our equivalent units of production are. And that is just the sum of the number of units completed and transferred out and the number of equivalent units in our ending WIP. So for transferred in, it would be 2,400. For direct materials, 2,000. And for conversion costs, it's going to be 2,100. That's our physical unit section. Now we can move down to our costs to account for. So what we have here is in beginning WIP. How much was the cost of units which were transferred in from beginning WIP? Given in our information, it was 18,000. And then for direct materials, it was 0. And for conversion costs, it was 2,000. Again, taking this all from the beginning WIP line of our information, which means these units that we started the period with had a total cost equal to the sum of those three numbers, or 20,000. Then we have our cost added during the period. So from our information, we can see that our conversion costs added, we'll start there, were 40,000. Our direct materials added was 30,000. Well, where's our transferred in? Well, that's pretty easy. See, whatever we transferred out of the first department has to be the cost that we transferred in. So if we go back and check our machining, we see that we transferred out right here a total of $90,000 worth of costs. And if it was transferred out of the first division, it has to be transferred in to the second division. So this has to be equal to the $90,000 in costs that were transferred out of the machining department, which means that our total costs to account for transferred in is going to be $108,000. Our total costs for direct materials is going to be $30,000. And our total costs for conversion costs to account for is going to be $42,000. Let's go over here and finish this number. Our costs added during the period were equal to the sum of the cost transferred in plus our cost for direct materials and our cost for conversion costs. Comes out to be $160,000. And if we do the math really fast right here, we see that $20,000 plus $160,000 is $180,000. $108,000 plus $30,000 plus $42,000 also, as we'll see, equal to $180,000. And let's fix my formatting here because it didn't, so let's fix it live in the video. There we go. Now we have to figure out what our equivalent units of production were. Again, that's what's up here for total units accounted for. For transferred in, it was 2,400. For our direct materials, it was 2,000. And for our conversion costs, it was 2,100. Which means our cost per equivalent unit that we have here is going to be equal to our total cost to account for divided by our total equivalent units of production. So $45 per unit transferred in, which if we go back we see makes sense, right? Because each unit had $25 in direct materials cost and $20 in conversion costs incurred within the machining department. Well, it's 45, so that's where the 45 comes from. Those transferred in. Direct materials from the assembly department is $30,000 in costs divided by the 2,000 equivalent units of production, $15 per unit. Over here we have $42,000 in cost. If we divide that by the 2,100 equivalent units for conversion cost, that's $20 per unit. So now we get to go and figure out what costs we can account for. So completed and transferred out, we are going to have a cost which is equal to the number of units which we transferred out of the department, 1,900, times the cost per equivalent unit, which was 45 bucks, gives us 85,500. For direct materials, it's the 1,900 units we transferred out times the $15 per equivalent unit of direct material costs. Which my thing froze, but I fixed it. I don't know why that happened. 28,500. And then conversion cost, 1,900 times 20, 38,000. For ending WIP, well, it's just the number of equivalent units in ending WIP times that cost per equivalent unit. So 500 times 45 is 22,500. 100 times the 15 gives us 1,500. And 200 times 20 bucks gives us 4,000. Now we can figure out our totals. Total cost completed and transferred out is going to be $152,000. And that is the cost from both departments, because we have all the costs that are transferred in as well. So that's our total cost of all of these goods that we are transferring to finished goods to be able to sell. That's what we're going to use to record our COGS. For ending WIP, we have incurred a total of $28,000 worth of costs. And then over here, for transferred in, we have a total of $108,000. And because we like to use Excel fast, let's fill handle. Should be $30,000 for direct materials, $42,000 for conversion costs, and $180,000 for total cost.